Hey everyone, Myets here. Basically, I wanted to make this video because across this last year, I watched a lot of Marvel shows, with the majority of them being Spider-Man shows. And basically, I wanted to make this video so I could talk about them and give my opinion on them. Now, I don't want this video to be too long because, I actually wanted it to come out today. So this is going to be split into two parts. One part where I'm going to be talking about the 20th century Spider-Man shows, and one where I'm going to be talking about the 21st century Spider-Man shows. So yeah, let's get right into this. Okay, before I begin, I just want to say which shows I will not be talking about in this review. I won't be talking about either of the live-action 70s Spider-Man shows, because, they're not on Disney+. I'm not going to be talking about the 60s Spider-Man show, because once again, not on Disney+. I'm not going to be talking about Spectacular Spider-Man or Spider-Man the New Animated Series. I've heard they're really good, but once again, they're not on Disney+. And I'm not going to watch the new 2021 show, Spidey and His Amazing Friends, because I want to keep whatever sanity I have left, and I'm not going to watch the entirety of that. So yeah, I just want to let you guys know that I'm not going to be talking about those shows. So okay, now go on to the video. Okay, now the way we're going to do this is that I'm going to go from the order they came out. So the first one we're going to be talking about is... I just want to say that first off, I don't really know much about Spider-Woman, so I'm sorry if this is really short. Now the thing is, this really isn't a Spider-Man show, although Spider-Man does make a couple appearances. But I just decided to add this here for the fun of it. Now with Spider-Woman, there's not really much to say, because it's not bad, it's not great. It's just something that's really kind of there. And also, from what I've heard, it's extremely comic book inaccurate. Like, it's wildly different. Then again, from what I've also heard is that Spider-Woman's origin story in the comics is, extremely convoluted, so it was probably a good thing they changed it for this show. But one thing about this show that I find extremely interesting is, like I said before, they had Spider-Man in this show. You would think they'd probably just grab some random guy and have him play Spider-Man. But no, get this. They got Paul Soles from the 60s Spider-Man show back to reprise his role after about 9 years. I just find that crazy. Like, I have no idea how they were able to do that. But it's really cool that they were able to bring back Paul Soles as Spider-Man. But like I said before, there isn't really much to note about this show. So let's get on to the next show, which hopefully might be a bit more interesting. Spider-Man! The 1981 Spider-Man show isn't really talked about a lot, and that's a shame because it's actually pretty good. Also this, design-wise, it is probably the most comic book accurate Spider-Man thing, because pretty much every single look the characters have is directly from the comics, which is really cool. There's some interesting stuff in here. Like, one thing I find really interesting is that in this show, Doctor Doom's a main villain, which is, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, but, it's kind of interesting. Oh man, I just remember one episode which was really just, out there. Basically, in this episode, Spider-Man tries to stop Magneto, and the X-Men never show up. There's not a single reference to any of them. You have an episode with Magneto, one of the most iconic X-Men villains, and there's not even a single X-Men in this episode. It's just Spider-Man fighting Magneto, which is just so weird. I guess they only had the licensing to Magneto, but man, that's odd. But yeah, it is a pretty good Spider-Man show. One thing I will say is extremely odd is the ending. Because, there's no Mary Jane, there's no Gwen Stacy. There is Betty Brant in the show, but, that's pretty much it. So pretty much, the final episode of the show ends with Peter ending up with Medusa of the Inhumans, which is just so out there. I have no idea why they decided to do that. But other than some, kind of weird decisions, this is a really good Spider-Man show that's super faithful to the comics. But here's the thing, this wasn't the only Spider-Man show to air in 1981. There was also... Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends is remembered a lot more by people, which, it's a shame for the 1981 show because, like I said before, it's pretty good. But, this show definitely deserves the recognition it gets. In this show, it's Spider-Man and two other superheroes, Iceman from the X-Men and Firestar, who's a hero created just for this show. And, the reason the character was created was quite interesting because, they wanted to use the Human Torch for the show, but what ended up happening is they couldn't get the rights for the Human Torch, so they had to create a new character entirely, which is the same thing that happened to a Fantastic Four show, which couldn't use the Human Torch, and they instead had to use something completely different. And it's also cool that, the character got introduced later on in the comics too. Pretty much the 1981 Spider-Man show, but if you added 2 more people to it. Also, just like the 81 show, there's some really wacky episodes, like one where an alien crash lands on Earth, and Peter loves the alien, so he plans on going back to her home world, just ditching everything. His friends, Aunt May, just everyone. He immediately leaves, even though he's probably known them for like a day. So, that's kind of silly. And, it is really enjoyable. And one thing I will say about all Spider-Man shows, it feels like Spider-Man shows are all Avengers shows, but just with Spider-Man on the front of it. Because Spider-Man in all of these shows crosses over with so many characters from Marvel, especially in some shows I'm going to be talking about later. And one thing I definitely want to say about the show is that the actor who plays Spider-Man, Dan Gilvezan, he is a really good Spider-Man. Especially with the way he talks, it feels really heroic. Like the way he talks as Spider-Man, you can immediately tell that a superhero is talking. And he was so good in fact as Spider-Man that they even brought him back for the game Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions to play Spider-Man 2099. And that was really cool. And yeah, when it comes to Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, this is a pretty good show. I definitely recommend it. Yeah, obviously there's going to be some of that 80s goofiness as well as with the 81 show, but if you can look past that, it's really enjoyable. Now, it's time for us to talk about the peak of Spider-Man. Spider-Man the Animated Series is a masterpiece and is the best Spider-Man show I've seen. Everything about this is great. The theme song is my favorite Spider-Man theme song, period. I was kind of weird about the season-long story arcs, but they were incredibly good. And it has some of the best Spider-Man stories when it comes to TV shows. Also, I just have to say this. Christopher Daniel Barnes is easily in my top 3 Spider-Man of all time. Also, I'll give a shout out to whoever can guess who my 2 other favorite Spider-Man are. He just feels so much like Spider-Man. One problem with a lot of Spider-Man stuff is that they have some parts of his character, but not the entirety of Peter's character. In this, it is just the entirety of Peter's character. Because, they actually had time to get everything about his character on screen. Since, this is a TV show instead of a 2-hour movie. I can't form good enough words to describe just how good this show is. It's a show which I 100% recommend for you to watch if you are a Spider-Man fan. And yeah, I don't really have much left to say. Spider-Man the Animated Series is easily the best Spider-Man show. And next up is man, this show. Okay, you know what? First, I'll say what I like about the show. First of all, the intro, it's really good. I enjoy it. And second of all, Rino Romano as Spider-Man. Now, his Spider-Man in this is not good, but it's not his fault. It makes Spider-Man really unlikable. But he later returns to play Spider-Man again in the 2 Spider-Man games, Spider-Man 2000 and Enter Electro. And in those games, he does a pretty good job at Spider-Man. Rino Romano is a good Spider-Man, just not really in this show. And then, the problems. This show is just such an odd Spider-Man story. Basically, there's this place called Counter-Earth, which is across from the sun, which the people of Earth just discover. And pretty much, they send John Jameson there, but while the rocket is being launched, Venom and Carnage get on board. And pretty much Spider-Man is blamed for it. And so, Peter pretends that Spider-Man dies, and then takes a new suit, which he stole from Reed Richards. Yep, he just straight up stole it. And he becomes Spider-Man Unlimited. He goes on the second rocket ship there and heads to Counter-Earth, where it turns out it's a planet where pretty much there's this guy called the High Evolutionary that created these things called Bestials, which are animals that act like humans. And how pretty much humans are now second-rate citizens in Counter-Earth. And now Spider-Man has to, get John Jameson home and, try and stop that. Except he really does not want to try to stop that. He pretty much act as if with great power there must also come great responsibility never happened. Because he just completely ignores that. And he just wants to get out of there as fast as possible. Plus, even that premise alone is already really strange. But they had to add even more to it just to make it weird. Wasn't there being another planet directly across from the sun already weird enough? But they had to add even more. And now, there are reasons for why they did this. It's because, at the time, Marvel sold the rights to Spider-Man, I believe. So pretty much, they could make a Spider-Man show, but they had to make sure it had absolutely nothing to do with the source material of Spider-Man. And apparently what they were going to do was that they were going to do a Spider-Man 2099 show, which, yeah, that would have been really cool. But the problem was, Batman Beyond came out the same year, so they didn't want to do that, or else it would look like they were just copying Batman Beyond. And so we ended up with Unlimited, which, man, this show is just a mess. Even the show being made was constantly a struggle. This show had 13 episodes. It was canceled after 13 episodes, but the show lasted from 1999 to 2001. Between episode 3 and episode 4, there was a full year gap. And the main reason for that was because believe it or not, Pokemon inspired shows were becoming so popular, it was kind of, making everything else just get thrown away. And the show ended on the 13th episode with a cliffhanger, which is something that happens surprisingly a lot in Spider-Man shows. For example, the ending of Spider-Man the Animated Series. Or, I haven't seen it, but I know Spectacular Spider-Man ends with a cliffhanger. That happens a lot in these shows. One thing that's really dumb is people that say that this is the same universe as Spider-Man the Animated Series. Because, come on, it isn't. Because, it works, but it does not work well. Speaking of not working well, this show. Yeah, this is probably the worst Spider-Man show. It's not even bad, it's just a complete mess. So, yeah, not a great way to end it off. Also, sorry for the very loud fan you can hear. Well, we finally made it to the end. We've gone through the good, the okay, the Spider-Man Unlimited, and one thing I will say about all these shows, I didn't regret watching any of them. All of them I enjoyed watching, even Spider-Man Unlimited. So that's nice. Well guys, I hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did enjoy this video, check out some of these videos on the screen. And if you really enjoyed this video, subscribe to see when my latest content comes out. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.